Azy Brooks stared at the $30 bill in his trembling hand. It wasn't just money. It was the last money, the absolute end of the line between him and the kind of ruin you don't come back from. Across the splintered table, an old man named Ezekiel Marsh just kept nodding, a strange, disconnected smile on his face. He pointed a shaky finger at a barn that looked like one good gust of wind would turn it into a pile of toothpicks. Good for storage, Ezekiel repeated, his voice a dry rasp. Good for storage. But something was terribly wrong with this whole picture. 1 second, Ezekiel's eyes were sharp as a hawk's, locking onto Azy with an unnerving intensity. The next, they'd go cloudy, lost, like a TV station losing its signal. It was that look old folks get when the world inside their head starts coming apart. Azy wasn't a fool. He saw the fresh tire tracks leading right up to the barn door, deep ruts in the soft mud. Yet the old man swore on his mother's grave that the barn had been sealed up, completely empty, for the better part of a decade. And then there were the sounds. It wasn't the wind groaning through the warped planks. It wasn't the creak and settle of old wood. It was something else. Something inside. Shuffling. A low, heavy sound of something moving. Something alive. $30, Ezekiel said again, his voice suddenly firm. He shoved a folded yellow deed into Azy's calloused palm, his grip surprisingly strong. But you can't go in there, not till I'm gone. You understand? Just give me time to get clear down the road. Azy's mind was screaming with questions. Why? Why the secrecy? What was making that noise inside? Why on God's green earth would anyone sell a barn, even a wreck like this one, for the price of a cheap dinner? A barn that clearly had something inside it. But desperate men don't ask the questions they know they can't afford the answers to. And with his last $30 on the line, Azy was the most desperate man in the county. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Ezekiel Marsh's frantic family had been searching for him for 2 straight days. They had filed a missing persons report. They had no idea their father, lost in the fog of his own mind, was out here selling off pieces of their lives for pocket change. When you're that far down, you don't think to ask for ID. You don't think to check if the man signing the deed actually has the legal right to sign it. The deal was done, the money was gone, and inside that ramshackle barn, whatever had been left behind shifted its weight again, a low guttural sound echoing in the silence. It sounded hungry. Azy waited. 20 minutes. He counted every second, watching the dust settle on the dirt road where Ezekiel's ancient truck had finally disappeared. The old man's warning echoed in his ears. Don't go in till I'm gone. It felt less like a request and more like a threat. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He walked to the massive barn doors, his boots crunching on the gravel. He wrapped his hands around the thick weathered wood and pulled. The rusted hinges screamed in protest, a sound like tearing metal that set his teeth on edge. The second the doors cracked open, the smell hit him like a physical blow. It was a thick, heavy mixture of old hay, rotting leather, and something else. Something sharp and alive and deeply wrong. His eyes struggled to adjust to the gloom, fighting through the shafts of dusty light cutting through the holes in the roof. He took a hesitant step inside, and then another, and that's when he saw it. In the farthest, darkest corner of the barn, a creature of impossible size stood silent as a statue. It was a horse, a Clydesdale, so massive it seemed to fill the entire space. Its coat was a matted, tangled mess, dull and lifeless. Its ribs stuck out like the rungs of a ladder beneath its patchy hide. The great beast lifted its head, a slow, agonizingly weak movement. Its dark, liquid eyes found Azy's, and in their depths, he saw a universe of weariness, of pain, and a tiny flickering spark of desperate hope. Empty feed buckets, coated in cobwebs and a thick layer of dust, lay overturned nearby. Jesus Christ, Azy whispered, the words catching in his throat. He took a step closer, expecting the animal to shy away, to bolt. But it didn't. It just stood there watching him, too weak or too broken to even be afraid. That one fact told Azy everything he needed to know about how long it had been. How long this magnificent animal had been alone in the dark. He'd grown up around horses, worked on ranches his whole life. He knew the lines of a purebred when he saw one. Healthy, this animal would fetch thousands, maybe tens of thousands, at an auction. It was a creature of legend, a giant from a storybook. But this one was starving to death, forgotten, abandoned in the chaos of whatever family tragedy had sent Ezekiel Marsh spiraling into confusion. Azy's mind was a whirlwind. $30 for a barn was a mystery, but $30 for a barn with a prize-winning Clydesdale inside? This wasn't just a weird deal anymore. This was something else entirely. Either Ezekiel had completely forgotten he owned one of the most valuable animals in the state, or something far more sinister was at play. The horse took a shaky, tentative step forward, and a pained grunt escaped its throat. Azy saw it then, a pronounced, ugly limp in its front left leg. An old injury, maybe, something that could have been treated, managed, but left to fester like this? The cost of a vet, the specialized care, the medicine. It would be more money than Azy had seen in his entire life. He was broke, beyond broke. He couldn't afford to feed himself tomorrow, let alone save a dying giant. He instinctively pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the number for the local vet, Doc Martinez. But he stopped. What would he even say? Hey, Doc, I just bought a barn from a confused old man for 30 bucks, and surprise, there's a $10,000 horse inside that he forgot about. Can you come fix it? Would that make him the owner? Or would it make him a thief, a man who took advantage of an elder with dementia? The law wouldn't be on his side. He could see the jail cell already. The horse let out a soft nicker, a sound so full of pain and loneliness, it felt like a punch to Azy's chest. This animal was dying. Every minute he stood here, debating, was a minute closer to its end. He had to know, who did this horse really belong to? And why was Ezekiel so terrified of Azy finding it before he was long gone? As if his thoughts had summoned them from the ether, he heard it. The low rumble of engines. Not one, multiple. Coming down the dirt road and coming fast. The horse's ears pricked up, swiveling towards the sound. Its whole body tensed, and for the first time since Azy had opened those creaking doors, the magnificent dying animal looked truly, utterly afraid. Azy stepped out of the barn just as 3 pickup trucks skidded to a stop, kicking up a storm of dust and gravel that choked the air. The lead truck belonged to his neighbor, Nolan Graves, a man who knew everyone's business. But the other 2 were filled with strangers, a middle-aged woman with a face etched in worry, and 2 younger men who looked like they were ready to fight the world. They spilled out of their trucks before the engines were even off. "Azy Brooks," Nolan called out, his voice heavy. "Looks like we need to have a little talk about what you just did here." The woman marched toward him, her stride long and purposeful, her face a mask of controlled fury. "I'm Sarah Marsh," she said, her voice tight. "Ezekiel's daughter, and whatever my father sold you, it's not valid. It's not his to sell." Azy felt his stomach plummet, turning into a cold, hard knot of dread. He'd just spent his last $30 on a ghost, a deal that never existed. "Ma'am, I didn't know. That horse in there," one of the younger men cut him off, jabbing a finger aggressively toward the dark opening of the barn. "His name is Thunder. He's worth $12,000. My grandfather raised him from a colt. We've been looking for him for 2 days ever since Dad disappeared, and we realized what he must have done." So the ghost had a name, Thunder, and a family who had been tearing the county apart looking for him. The old man, he seemed confused, Azy admitted, his hand instinctively going to the worthless deed in his pocket. But he was insistent. He wanted to sell. "I've got witnesses." "My father has dementia." Sarah's voice cracked, the anger giving way to sheer, heartbreaking exhaustion. "He's been selling things for months, giving away family heirlooms, land, anything he can get his hands on. We've been fighting tooth and nail to get legal guardianship. But the courts, the paperwork takes so much time. And in the meantime, he's just bleeding. Bleeding money and memories and making deals he has no right to make." Nolan, ever the peacemaker, stepped between them, holding up his hands. "Now hold on, Sarah. Azy here, he made a purchase in good faith. He had no way of knowing about Ezekiel's condition." "Good faith?" The other young man, who Azy guessed was Sarah's son, let out a bitter, ugly laugh. He bought a barn for $30 and found a $12,000 champion Clydesdale inside. You call that a legitimate transaction? You call that good faith? Azy's gaze drifted back to the barn. Through the open doors, he could see Thunder, standing motionless, his massive head lowered. The horse was watching them, his ears swiveling back and forth, as if he understood every word, as if he knew his fate was being decided by a group of angry, shouting strangers. "That horse is sick," Azy said, his voice dropping to a low, quiet hum that cut through their arguing. "He's been neglected, starved, for weeks, maybe longer. He needs a veterinarian, right now, today." He locked eyes with Sarah's son. "He needs medicine, special feed, 1,000 other things. You got the money for all that?" The family fell silent. They exchanged uneasy glances, the anger draining from their faces, replaced by a raw, painful shame. Sarah's expression crumbled. We've been dealing with Dad's medical bills," she stammered. "The care facility alone, it's $3,000 a month, and his medications. So you want the horse back," Azy stated, and it wasn't a question. "But you can't afford to save him." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It stretched out between them, broken only by the sound of Thunder's ragged, labored breathing drifting from the barn. In that moment, everyone standing in that dusty clearing understood the cruel, impossible math of the situation. The horse needed thousands of dollars in medical care, immediately, or he would die. The people who legally owned him couldn't afford a single dime of it, and the one man who might have a chance to save him, the man who had just gambled his last dollar on a sliver of hope, had just discovered he had no legal right to even try. The world had just closed in on them all. Dr. Martinez arrived 30 minutes later, her veterinary truck kicking up its own cloud of dust. Azy's desperate, rambling phone call had been enough. She took one look at Thunder, a long, clinical gaze, and her professional optimism vanished, replaced by a grim set of her jaw. "This is bad," she said, her voice low as she ran her expert hands along Thunder's bony flanks. "He's severely dehydrated, dangerously malnourished. I'm seeing early signs of colic, which can kill a horse in hours. There's hoof rot starting. And this leg," she gently palpated the swollen joint, "this needs x-rays. Immediately." She looked up, her eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "Let me be blunt. Without intensive treatment, starting today, he'll be dead within a week, maybe less." Sarah Marsh wrung her hands, her knuckles white. "Doctor, please. We want to do what's right. He was my father's pride and joy. But the bills, Dad's medical expenses, have wiped out everything. The nursing home, the specialists, we're barely staying afloat." "I understand financial pressure, Sarah. I truly do," Dr. Martinez replied, her tone softening slightly as she prepared a syringe. "But this animal is in an emergency situation. He's suffering. He needs IV fluids, a course of strong antibiotics, specialized feed, therapeutic hoof care. We're looking at a minimum of $1,500, and that's just to stabilize him. That's not even counting the x-rays or treating the leg." Azy watched as Thunder accepted the injection without even flinching. The horse was simply too weak, too exhausted to fight, even if he'd wanted to. The fight had been drained out of him weeks ago. "What if I paid for it?" Azy heard himself say, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "You don't own him," Sarah's son Michael snapped immediately. "That sale wasn't legal. The deed is worthless." "But you can't afford to save him," Azy shot back, his frustration boiling over. "So what's the plan, Michael? We let him die while you stand around waving a piece of paper? While you argue about who has the right to watch him suffer?" Dr. Martinez stepped between them, a syringe in her hand. "I've seen this 100 times," she said, her voice sharp with authority. "Families torn apart by an elderly relative's decline. Let me tell you something. Nobody wins when pride and legalities get in the way of animal welfare. The only one who loses is the animal." She paused, pressing her fingers to Thunder's neck to check his weak, thready pulse. "There might be a way through this," she said slowly. "A solution that could work for everyone." Nolan, who had been standing back, silent, stepped forward. "What kind of solution?" Azy could front the medical expenses. the vet proposed, her eyes flicking to Azy to gauge his reaction. He covers the cost of care, the feed, the rehab. In exchange, the family signs a temporary agreement. They allow him to rehabilitate Thunder. When the horse is healthy again, they sell him. They split the profits, with Azy's investment paid back first. Sarah considered it, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. We'd need a legal document, she said, thinking out loud. Something drawn up by a lawyer, to protect everyone. And what if Thunder doesn't make it? Michael asked, his voice laced with suspicion. What if Azy spends all that money and the horse dies anyway? Then what? The question hung in the air. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the struggling animal. That's the risk, she said finally. This horse is in very, very bad shape. Even with the best treatment, there's no guarantee he'll pull through. You could invest $2,000 and end up with nothing but more heartbreak. Azy looked at Thunder. The great horse was now leaning his heavy head against the rough wood of the barn wall, his eyes half closed, completely exhausted from the simple act of standing for the examination. His breathing was a shallow, painful rasp, each breath a visible, monumental effort. How long do I have to make a decision? Azy asked, his voice barely a whisper. Hours, Dr. Martinez said bluntly. Not days. Hours. I can give him some basic fluids and a painkiller now, just to buy us a little time. But without comprehensive, round-the-clock treatment starting today, this whole conversation becomes academic. We'll be talking about disposal costs instead of vet bills. As if to punctuate her grim warning, Thunder's legs suddenly buckled. He stumbled, catching himself at the last second, his massive frame trembling with the effort of staying upright. The family watched in horrified silence. The stark, brutal reality of the situation finally sank in. Legal ownership was meaningless. Good intentions were meaningless. All that mattered was the clock, and it was ticking faster and faster toward zero. It seemed for a moment that they might finally reach an agreement, that common sense and compassion might win the day. But just then, another vehicle turned off the main road and rumbled down the long dirt driveway. This time, it was a sheriff's patrol car, and it was not coming slowly. Sheriff Davidson stepped out of his car with the weary, bone-deep sigh of a man who spent his entire life cleaning up other people's messes. He was a familiar face in the county, a man who had seen it all, and right now, he looked like he wished he was anywhere else. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, a woman in a severe business suit emerged from the passenger side, clutching a thick briefcase like a shield. Sarah Marsh? The sheriff called out, his voice leaving no room for argument. This is Linda Foster. She's from Adult Protective Services. We got a call this morning. A report about your father making unauthorized property sales. Sarah's face went from pale to ghostly white. Sheriff, we're trying to handle this. It's a private family matter. Ma'am, it stopped being private the moment a report was filed, Sheriff Davidson said, his tone firm but not unkind. When we have an individual with documented dementia selling off valuable assets for pennies on the dollar, it becomes a matter for the county to investigate. We need to assess whether Mr. Ezekiel Marsh requires immediate legal intervention to protect him from potential exploitation. Ms. Foster interrupted, her voice crisp and devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of pure bureaucracy. Azy felt his throat tighten. What does that mean for the horse? The sheriff's gaze went past him, into the dark barn where Thunder was still swaying on his unsteady legs. Depends, he said. If the sale is officially ruled invalid due to diminished capacity, then any assets involved in that transaction get frozen. The horse becomes evidence, essentially. It's county property until the court can sort out guardianship and untangle this whole mess. The horse is dying, Dr. Martinez said, her voice rising in disbelief. Legal proceedings could take weeks, months. This animal needs treatment today. He doesn't have weeks. Miss Foster, unfazed, opened her briefcase and began pulling out stacks of forms, each one filled with tiny print. I understand the urgency, doctor, but there are protocols we must follow. If Mr. Marsh's mental state was compromised, as it appears to be, then any transfer of property, including livestock, is likely fraudulent. It will need to be reversed. So Thunder dies while you all debate in an office? Azy asked, his own voice rising now, laced with a fury he couldn't contain. That's your protocol? That's your solution? A dead horse? No one wants to see the animal suffer, son, Sheriff Davidson said, his eyes showing a hint of sympathy. But we can't just ignore a potential case of elder abuse, even if it was unintentional on your part. Michael, who had been silent, suddenly found his voice. Look, we get it. We know Grandpa made a mess of things. But right now, all we want to do is save Thunder. Can't we just figure out the legal stuff after he's not dying anymore? Ms. Foster shook her head, not even looking up from her paperwork. I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. Once APS is officially involved, we have to follow procedure to the letter. As of this moment, that horse would need to be placed in temporary county custody while we conduct our investigation. Temporary custody where? Dr. Martinez demanded, throwing her hands up in exasperation. Tell me, Ms. Foster, where exactly is the county facility equipped to handle a 1,000-pound critically ill Clydesdale? Is there a vet on staff? An equine ICU I'm not aware of? The bureaucratic reality crashed down on all of them at once. It was a perfect, horrifying storm of good intentions and fatal incompetence. The very system designed to protect Ezekiel and his interests was about to murder his most beloved possession through sheer mind-numbing inaction. As if sensing the shift, sensing that his fate was now in the hands of people who saw him as a form to be filled out, Thunder let out a soft, wheezing whinny. He took one painful, deliberate step toward the group. The movement was agonizing to watch, his injured leg barely supporting his immense weight. He was pleading, in the only way he knew how. I've got an idea, Nolan said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. Sheriff, what if we reframe this? What if we stop treating it as a property dispute and start treating it as an emergency animal welfare case? Focus on saving the horse first. Figure out who owns him later. Sheriff Davidson rubbed his chin, considering it. The county does have emergency seizure powers in documented animal cruelty situations. This isn't cruelty, Sarah protested, tears welling in her eyes. My dad loved that horse more than anything. He didn't mean to neglect him. He forgot. His brain is broken. Intent doesn't matter to a starving horse, Sarah, Dr. Martinez said quietly, but her words landed with the force of a hammer blow. Miss Foster glanced at her watch, a clear signal that her patience was wearing thin. I need to make some calls, she announced. Get clarification from the county attorney's office. In the meantime, nobody touches that horse. Nobody moves that horse. Nobody treats that horse. Is that clear? He is now potential evidence in a county investigation. As the two officials walked away, their phones already pressed to their ears, Azy was left standing there with a heartbroken family and a dying horse. Precious, irreplaceable time was slipping away, second by second, while someone in an air-conditioned office miles away decided whether Thunder would live or die. Thunder's breathing was getting shallower, his head was hanging lower, and now it was illegal to even try and save him. 2 hours crawled by, 2 hours of phone calls, of legal jargon, of, we're waiting to hear back. And with every passing minute, Thunder faded a little more. He could barely stand now. His breathing was a shallow, rapid flutter in his massive chest. Dr. Martinez had done what she could with the initial injection, but it was like using a single bucket of water to fight a forest fire. This is insane, Azy muttered, his eyes fixed on the horse's trembling form. We're just going to stand here and watch him die. For paperwork. Ms. Foster finally returned from her car, her face a mask of frustration. The county attorney's office is completely backed up. A major case just broke. They can't possibly give us a ruling on this until tomorrow morning, at the earliest. Tomorrow morning? Dr. Martinez exploded, her professional calm shattering into a million pieces. That horse will not live through the night. Are you listening to me? He will be dead by sunrise if we do not get him to my clinic and on intensive therapy right now. Sarah Marsh had been crying silently for the last hour, her face buried in her hands. Thunder was Dad's whole world, she whispered, her voice thick with grief. He raised him from a foal, spent every single day with him, grooming him, talking to him, until the dementia got so bad, until we had to move him to the facility. This would destroy him. If he could even understand what was happening, it would kill him. Where is your father now? Sheriff Davidson asked gently. Back at the care home, Michael answered, his voice hollow. We got him back there this morning. They had to sedate him. He was agitated, kept asking about Thunder. Said he needed to go check on him, make sure he was okay. That was it. That was the last straw. In that instant, Azy Brooks made a decision. It wasn't a logical decision. It wasn't a safe decision. It was a decision that would change everything. And it surprised everyone there, including himself. He turned and started walking toward the barn. I'm treating the horse. You can't do that, Ms. Foster said immediately, stepping in front of him. The property is under official investigation. You will be obstructing justice. Then arrest me, Azy said, not breaking his stride. He pulled his worn leather wallet from his back pocket. Dr. Martinez, what do you need to get started? Azy, think about this, Nolan warned, grabbing his arm. They'll throw the book at you. Interfering with an official APS investigation? They don't play around with that. Better that than watching this horse die while a bunch of bureaucrats cover their asses, Azy shot back. He peeled off the bills from his wallet. It wasn't much, the last of his savings from a job he'd lost 2 months ago. I've got $400, cash. Is that enough to start? Dr. Martinez looked from the money in Azy's hand to the stern face of Ms. Foster, to the conflicted expression of Sheriff Davidson. It's enough, she said, her voice firm with renewed purpose. It's enough for the emergency stabilization, the heavy-duty antibiotics, the IV fluids, pain management for that leg. It will give him a fighting chance. Do it, Azy said, pressing the money into her hand. Sheriff Davidson stepped forward, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of his position. Mr. Brooks, I am officially advising you that proceeding with this course of action could result in serious criminal charges. Will those charges bring Thunder back to life? Azy asked, his eyes burning. He turned his back on the officials and faced Sarah. Your dad loved this horse. Forget the law. Forget the paperwork. What would he want us to do right now? Sarah wiped the tears from her eyes, her expression hardening with resolve. He'd want Thunder to live, she said, her voice clear and strong. Dad always said, you don't judge a man by how he treats his equals. You judge him by how he treats the animals that can't defend themselves. Miss Foster pulled out her phone again, her thumb jabbing at the screen. I have to report this. I'm calling my supervisor right now. Call whoever you want, Azy said, turning to Dr. Martinez, but do it while she's saving this horse's life. Dr. Martinez looked at Sheriff Davidson, a silent question in her eyes. The sheriff stood there for a long, heavy moment, the fate of everyone present resting on his shoulders. Then with a slow, deliberate movement, he took a single step backward. He didn't say a word, but his actions spoke volumes. He was getting out of the way. I need to get him to my clinic, Dr. Martinez said, already moving, her mind racing. This barn isn't sterile. I don't have the equipment I need here. How in the world are we going to transport him? Michael asked, looking at Thunder's trembling, exhausted body. He can barely stand. Very, very carefully, the vet replied, grabbing her medical bag. And we pray. We pray he's strong enough to make the trip. As Dr. Martinez began administering the first round of emergency treatment, Azy knew he'd just crossed a line. He'd bet everything he didn't have on a horse that was more likely to die than live. He was facing fines, maybe even jail time. But then he looked into Thunder's deep, trusting eyes. And he realized that some decisions aren't about logic. They're not about what's legal or what's safe. Sometimes they're just about being able to look at yourself in the mirror the next morning. Getting Thunder into Dr. Martinez's horse trailer was one of the most terrifying things Azy had ever done. The massive Clydesdale's legs trembled violently with every single step up the steep ramp. His breath came in ragged, wheezing gasps. Twice his back legs gave out entirely, and he started to go down, only to be held up by the combined strength of Azy, Nolan, and Michael, all straining, their muscles screaming in protest against his immense weight. Easy, boy, easy now, Azy whispered, his face right next to Thunder's huge head, his hands stroking the horse's sweaty neck. We're almost there. We're going to get you fixed up. just a little further. The 30-minute drive to the veterinary clinic felt like it took a lifetime. Dr. Martinez drove at a crawl, taking every turn in the road with agonizing slowness. Azy rode in the back, in the dark confines of the trailer with the horse, keeping a steady hand on him, talking to him in a low, calming murmur. Through the small barred window at the front of the trailer, he could see the headlights of the sheriff's car following them, a constant, grim reminder of the trouble he was now in. Behind the sheriff, the Marsh family followed in their own truck, an unlikely, silent procession into the night. At the clinic, it took all four of them again to coax Thunder down the ramp and into the brightly lit treatment bay. The horse was at the absolute end of his strength. The moment his hooves touched the padded floor of the clinic, his legs gave out completely. He didn't just stumble, he collapsed. He went down hard, 1,000 pounds of bone and muscle hitting the floor with a sickening thud that echoed through the sterile room. "Is he dying?" Sarah cried out, her voice breaking, a raw sound of pure anguish. Dr. Martinez was already on her knees beside him, a whirlwind of focused professional energy. "He's in shock from the stress of the transport," she yelled, already shaving a patch on his neck, her hands moving with blinding speed as she inserted a thick IV line. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I wanted to treat him hours ago." She worked with a desperate urgency, administering fluids, injecting medications directly into the line. "His heart rate is through the roof," she said, her ear pressed to his chest. "Dangerously high, but he's responsive. His eyes are open." It was true, Thunder's great, dark eyes were open, and they were tracking the movement around him. When Azy knelt down beside his head, the horse let out a soft, low rumble and tried to lift his muzzle, just an inch, toward Azy's hand. "He knows you're helping him," Dr. Martinez said, not looking up from her work. "That's a good sign. It means he hasn't given up yet." Just then, Sheriff Davidson appeared in the wide doorway of the treatment bay, his hat in his hands. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice heavy with official regret, "I just got off the phone with the county prosecutor. I've been instructed to inform you that charges will, in all likelihood, be filed against you in the morning. Interfering with an official investigation is a felony." "What kind of charges are we talking about?" Nolan asked, stepping forward to stand beside Azy. "Obstruction of justice, for starters," the sheriff said, "and depending on how the court rules on the sale, possibly theft of livestock if the horse is determined to have been stolen property." Azy didn't even look up. His eyes were locked on Thunder's. He reached out and gently stroked the horse's face. "Worth it?" he said quietly. Ms. Foster from APS joined the sheriff in the doorway. She looked harried, flustered, the picture of a bureaucrat whose carefully ordered world had just been thrown into chaos. There's been a development," she said, sounding almost reluctant to share the news. "I spoke with the director of the facility where Mr. Marsh is staying." She took a deep breath. "His lucid moments are becoming more and more rare. But this afternoon, after he was brought back, he had one. A moment of absolute clarity. He specifically asked the staff to find his grandson, Michael." She looked directly at Michael. "He told them to tell you to sell Thunder, to sell him to the young man who needs him." Michael stepped forward, his eyes wide. "Grandpa said that? He was clear?" "The staff documented it in his official chart," Ms. Foster confirmed. "There were 2 nurses present as witnesses." He was apparently very insistent. He said Thunder needed someone who could give him the proper care, someone with the strength and the land to look after him. Dr. Martinez finally looked up from her patient, a flicker of something new in her eyes. "That changes things," she said. "That could complicate the legal situation significantly. If he had a documented lucid moment and clearly expressed his wishes." "It's not a legally binding contract," Sheriff Davidson cautioned, "but it speaks to intent. It could absolutely influence how the prosecutor decides to handle this. It reframes the entire incident." As they were talking, a change was coming over Thunder. The IV fluids were working their magic. The horse's breathing began to even out, growing deeper and less frantic. The wild, panicked look in his eyes was fading, replaced by a weary calm. He was still critically ill, but he was stabilizing. He was fighting back. "What's his prognosis, doctor?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a fragile hope. It's still too early to say for sure, Dr. Martinez replied, checking the drip rate on the IV bag. He's responding to the treatment. That's the best we could hope for right now. If he makes it through the night, if he's still with us in the morning, his chances improve significantly. Azy didn't leave his side. As night fell, he remained on the floor of the clinic, his hand resting on Thunder's massive neck, feeling the steady rhythmic pulse returning to the horse's veins. Machines beeped softly around them, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. Outside the open door in the cool night air, he could hear the hushed, urgent voices of Sarah, Michael, and Sheriff Davidson. They were planning something, figuring out their next move in this complicated, heartbreaking mess. Whatever they decided, Azy knew his part was simple. Stay with Thunder, and pray that the choice to save this horse's life wouldn't end up costing him everything else he had in the world. Thunder made it through the night. When the sun rose, casting long shadows across the clinic floor, he was not only alive, but he was standing. It was a shaky, unsteady stance, but he was on his own 4 feet. By mid-morning, his vital signs had stabilized enough for Dr. Martinez to take x-rays of his injured leg. The group gathered around the glowing light board in her office, a tense, silent huddle. "Well, I'll be," the vet said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It's an old fracture, that's for sure. But it healed poorly, without being set properly. That's what caused the chronic pain and swelling." She pointed to a spot on the film. "But the bone itself is strong. There's no infection. With a set of custom orthopedic shoes and a few months of careful physical therapy, I think he can make a full recovery. Full mobility." It was the first piece of truly good news they'd had in 2 days. The legal situation, too, had clarified overnight. Sarah and Michael had been on the phone for hours with a family attorney, faxing over Ezekiel's medical records, the nursing home chart, and the signed witness statements from the staff about his lucid moment. "We have 3 official witnesses to Grandpa's request," Michael announced when he and Sarah arrived at the clinic. "Our lawyer is confident. He says that while the original $30 sale wasn't valid on its own, Grandpa's clearly expressed wishes during a documented period of lucidity carry significant legal weight. It demonstrates his intent." Sheriff Davidson, who had come by to check on the situation, nodded. "I just spoke to the DA's office again," he said, looking at Azy. "Given the new evidence, and the fact that your actions directly resulted in saving the animal's life, they've decided not to file any charges against you, Mr. Brooks. They're officially reclassifying this as a complex family matter, not a criminal case." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made his knees buckle washed over Azy, but his focus immediately returned to the horse in the stall behind him. Thunder was now cautiously munching on a small portion of medicated hay Dr. Martinez had given him, his ears pricked forward with interest. "So what happens now?" Azy asked, looking at the Marsh family. Sarah took a deep breath, the lines of stress on her face finally softening. "We've talked it over," she said. "All night. Dad's care costs are only going to get higher from here. His condition, it's progressive. We can't afford to keep Thunder, not properly. We love him, but keeping him would mean watching him decline all over again the next time a big medical bill comes in. We can't do that to him." "We want to honor what Grandpa wanted," Michael added, his voice thick with emotion. He knew he couldn't take care of Thunder anymore. He was trying to find him a safe place to land. In his own mixed-up way, he was trying to save him. Dr. Martinez finished checking Thunder's IV line. "A full recovery isn't going to be quick or cheap," she warned. "We're talking months of specialized care. Daily medication, a specific diet, regular visits from the farrier for his shoes, and a very gradual exercise regimen to rebuild his muscle without stressing that leg." "That's going to be expensive," Nolan observed quietly. "Very," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "We're talking ongoing costs of several $100s a month, on top of the initial bill for his emergency treatment here." Azy had been quiet through all of this, his hand resting on the stall door, just watching the horse, watching him take another small bite of hay, the simple act a miracle compared to yesterday. "I have a proposal," he said. Everyone turned to look at him. "Let me take him," as he said. "I'll take full responsibility for all of it. The vet bills, the farrier, the feed, the rehab, everything. When he's healthy enough to work, I'll use him on my farm. He can have a home there for the rest of his life. He paused, then looked at Sarah and Michael. And if the day ever comes that I have to sell him for any reason, the Marsh family gets half the proceeds. No questions asked. You're talking about taking on years of expenses, Sarah pointed out, her eyes wide, with absolutely no guarantee of ever getting that money back. Maybe, Azy agreed, but I've got a couple of things you don't. I've got the time to dedicate to his recovery, and I've got a farm where he can heal properly, with plenty of open space. He smiled a little. And to be honest, after the last year I've had, I could use the company. As if he understood, Thunder lifted his head and looked directly at Azy. His eyes were clear, intelligent, and alert. The change from the dying, hopeless creature in the dark barn was nothing short of miraculous. There's one condition, Michael said. We want visiting rights, for us and for Grandpa. His memory's mostly gone, but on his good days, he still asks about Thunder. It would mean the world to him and to us if we could bring him to see the horse once he's settled. Ozzy didn't hesitate. He walked over and extended his hand to Michael. Deal. 8 months later, Thunder stood in the middle of Ozzy's greenest pasture, his dappled gray coat gleaming like polished silver in the afternoon sun. He was a different animal. The recovery had been long and slow, but he had returned to his full, magnificent glory. The limp was gone. His eyes were bright. He was the king of this small farm, and he knew it. Azy had poured every spare cent, every ounce of his energy into the horse's rehabilitation. But Thunder had repaid that investment 100 times over. His incredible strength and calm, gentle temperament made him the perfect partner for the heavy farm work that Azy's other smaller horses couldn't handle. Plowing fields that used to take 3 days now took less than one. The farm was more productive than it had been in years. He looks absolutely magnificent, Sarah said, leaning against the top rail of the fence. She and Michael had driven out for their monthly visit, bringing Ezekiel with them. The old man sat in his wheelchair at the edge of the pasture, his gaze fixed on the great horse. Ezekiel's dementia had progressed, and most days he was lost in a world of his own. But he always recognized Thunder. A light would come on in his faded eyes, and for a few precious moments, a piece of the old Ezekiel would return. Thunder, Ezekiel said softly, his voice a frail whisper. He reached a trembling hand through the fence rails. The giant horse immediately walked over, lowering his massive head with incredible gentleness until the old man could touch his soft muzzle. Good boy, Ezekiel murmured. It was one of the only phrases he still spoke with perfect clarity. He's been asking about him every day this week, Sarah told Azy, her eyes misty. Even when he can't remember our names, he remembers his horse. Dr. Martinez's truck pulled into the yard. Her routine checkups had become a welcome part of the monthly visits, a chance for everyone to see the proof of their shared success. She gave Thunder a thorough examination, checking his weight, listening to his heart, watching him walk and trot across the pasture. He's in perfect condition, she announced with a proud smile. A textbook recovery. You've done an exceptional job with him, Azy. Azy felt a familiar surge of pride. He's more than earned his keep around here, he said, scratching Thunder behind the ears. I honestly can't imagine this place without him now. Michael watched the quiet, gentle interaction between his grandfather and the horse. Grandpa made the right choice that day, he said. In his own way, he knew what he was doing. Thunder needed someone who could give him everything he required, someone who could save him. And I needed him, Azy admitted quietly. That $30 barn ended up saving us both. As the afternoon light began to fade, Azy helped Michael get Ezekiel settled back into the family's van. The old man kept his eyes on Thunder until the very last second, until the pasture disappeared from view as they drove away. Same time next month? Sarah asked from the passenger window. Thunder will be waiting, Azy promised. After they left, he walked back to the pasture. Thunder was still standing by the gate, watching the empty road. He'd learned the routine of these visits, and he was always a little subdued after Ezekiel left. Come on, boy, Azy said, swinging the gate open. We've still got work to do. Thunder followed him willingly, his massive hooves making a solid, confident sound on the hard-packed earth. The horse that had nearly died from neglect and bureaucracy was now the living, breathing heart of a thriving farm, and the last precious link to a fading old man's memory. Looking at the magnificent animal beside him, Azy realized that sometimes the best deals, the most important investments you ever make, have nothing to do with money. Sometimes they're measured in the lives you save, the promises you keep, and the impossible partnerships that end up changing everything. Thunder nickered softly and nudged Azy's shoulder, ready for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen right now for another unforgettable tale where courage and compassion collide in ways you never saw coming. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means the world to us.